Class and Society in An Inspector Calls. As a socialist, J.B. Priestley is interested in dismantling the class system, seeing it as a barrier to an equal, more just society. His play, therefore, is a direct attack on the injustices of class and a plea to the audience to join him in the fight for a classless future. An Inspector Calls is set in 1912. At this time, Britain was a very class-driven society. There were, and still are, three broad categories. The upper class, which consists of the aristocracy, royals, dukes and lords. The middle class, who are professionals, managers and so on. And the working class, at that time the majority of people. These are labourers and people who did low-skilled or manual work. The Burling family and Gerald are part of the upper middle class. As non-aristocrats, they have risen as far as they can go. Still, they are part of the elite and are rich, enjoying a privileged lifestyle. Nevertheless, even within the family, there are subtle distinctions. For example, Mr. Burling probably originally came from a slightly lower class background because in the stage directions at the start it is stated that he still speaks with a regional accent. He also makes a slight faux pas by complimenting the cook on the meal. In contrast, we are told that his wife is his social superior, whilst Gerald's mother comes from an old country family, landed people. Both of these indicate that Mrs. Burling and the Croft family are old money, meaning that they have been part of the upper middle class for generations. Mr. Burling is new money. He hasn't quite got the same pedigree. This explains why Mr. Burling is at pains to reassure Gerald that Sheila is from a good family because of his impending knighthood. If Mr. Burling becomes Sir Arthur, then that will put him on an equal footing to Gerald's father, who is already a knight. It's ironic that an individual who has worked his way up the class system resists any notion of helping others do the same, no matter how modestly. In contrast to the Crofts and the Burlings, as someone who works in a factory for low pay, Eva is firmly part of the lower working class, and so has a much lower standing in society. Even the little status that she has, however, is lost when she becomes unemployed and is forced into sex work. Then she becomes part of the underclass of criminals, the long-term out of work and the chronically poor. Her plight illustrates how harsh and unforgiving the class system is, and, as a direct result, how unfair and unequal society is as a whole. Consequently, Eva's relationship with Gerald and then Eric are doomed from the start. There is not the slightest chance that either the Crofts or Burlings would accept someone from Eva's background into their family. Such class prejudice is evident in all the characters' actions. It is particularly strong in Mrs. Burling, who disparagingly dismisses Eva as someone of that class, and being biased against her simply because she doesn't like her manner. Consequently, she has no qualms with rejecting Eva's case for charity. Looking at the other characters' attitudes, as a member of a superior class, and as a man, Mr. Burling feels Eva is disrespectful for daring to answer him back after the strike, so he sacks her. Sheila uses her class privilege as a rich woman by threatening to no longer shop at Millward's unless Eva is dismissed. Meanwhile, Gerald and Eric can have affairs because they are protected by their position in society. They can always return to so-called respectability with their servants and warm houses once they've had their fun. Clearly, Eva is presented as a victim of the imbalance caused by the deep-rooted unfairness of society. As Priestley's mouthpiece, the inspector seeks to address such inequality by trying to break down class barriers through making the Burlings and Gerald take responsibility and recognise the value of the hard-working majority who don't get their fair share of the profits they help to create. For Priestley, such classlessness was the path to a better, more equal society. Now, it is Sheila who begins to understand this when she states that the factory workers aren't cheap labour, they're people. Interestingly, she comes to this realization before she has shown her connection with Eva, which suggests that Sheila is already open to change. Later, she will implore her mother not to build up a kind of a wall between us and that girl. And of course, she refuses to let herself off the hook when the inspector is shown to be a hoax. Similarly, her brother Eric comes to appreciate how class has led to unfair outcomes within society. Like Sheila, he shows a hint of understanding before his guilt is presented to him by claiming that he would have kept Eva on at the factory after the strike. He also accepts the inspector's charge that he used Eva like an animal, a thing, not a person, and joins his sister in opposing their parents' obstinacy. In the end, it all comes down to the inspector's stern reminder in his final speech. Class divisions should be seen as something artificial and irrelevant, which hide the reality that we are all connected to one another by our common humanity.